Restoration Club podcast, back at it again. Had a great episode. Just if you didn't listen to Danny Woodhead episode, I would definitely jump in there and hear it. Man, Danny, he was awesome, wasn't he? Like the way he just kind of talked about amateur golf and then coming from the NFL world was kind of wild, and just knowing what he's kind of doing on the route.
So good. Blue collar guy, Nebraska guy, D2 guy. But yeah, to hear his journey and then move over to the golf space was a lot of fun for us.
Exactly. I think one of my favorite things has been, he's, like he said, he's from a blue-collar town, North Platte, Nebraska, and he's talking about this type of railroad town that it is and how he grew up and the type of dad he had with a PE teacher, and just working through that, like, work ethic, turns undrafted to 10 years in the NFL, which then turns into, like, I just want to compete. And he's out there competing at the USAM 4-ball coming up in May and those types of things. So it's cool to see guys who have great hearts really having that stuff come out. So, and here we are. And as you all see, Kyle Porter has joined us. We're pretty pumped about having you. Kyle, welcome to the clubhouse.
Yeah, thank you. Danny Woodhead and I have pretty similar skill sets, so it'll be a good follow to that pod. I appreciate you having me on.
Running and receiving, we hear you. That's exactly where it's at. So Kyle, for everyone that doesn't know you, number one, you're one of my top 3 favorite follows on X, and it's such a good thing, from statistics to just stories, and your writing's been great for years. I've been following the journey as it goes, and so if you would give everybody a little bit of a bio of who Kyle Porter is.
Yeah, so that's a very open-ended question.
Yes.
I have been in golf for like 13 years now. I started at the beginning of 2013. We can talk more about kind of that backstory maybe a little bit later on, but I was at CBS for almost that entire time. That was my first job in golf. People talk about, I worked at a cart barn, I worked as a caddy or whatever. My first job in golf was covering professional golf for CBSSports.com, which was probably a bad decision on their part, but I'm very grateful for it. So yeah, I've been in the golf world for 13 years now. Just left CBS Sports at the end of 2024, but I think sometimes you people online and you're like, oh, that must be what they do 24 hours a day, and it's like, this is what I think about professional golf. This is what I think about like Colin Morikawa. I'm like, oh, probably all he does is just hit golf balls. It's like, I've got this whole other life, and so for me, that's I've got 4 kids, which people probably are aware of because I talk about it a lot. But I've got just a cool community here in Richardson and kind of north of Dallas here in Texas, and I've got a kind of a whole world, I guess, outside of the weird online golf world that we're all kind of inhabiting these days.
That's good. So you mentioned like being writing for how you started in golf itself, with covering. Where did golf first start for you?
Yeah, I think the primary way that golf entered my life was my mom and my grandfather. So her dad, my grandfather was like a sicko before being a sicko was a thing. He was actually on, I've said this before, but so I apologize if anybody's heard it, but he was on the original, like when you could get on the list to get master's badges, he was on it.
Nice.
That's not really a thing anymore. I mean, they have the lottery, right, where you can do like a year at a time, but he was on the list where it was like Green Bay Packers tickets. You could just get the tickets, you could just get the badges, and he got on that, and I think it was like the mid 80s or somewhere around there, maybe late 80s. He was in the oil and gas industry, so that was like obviously kind of a thing in the southeast United States, and he loved golf, played all the time, played at Tulsa Country Club actually in Tulsa, and my mom got into it, and she was good. My grandfather was fine. He was an okay golfer. But my mom was very good. She played in some U.S. women's amateurs and was just like a really, really good amateur golfer. Never turned pro. I think mentally, I actually interviewed her for my newsletter a couple of weeks ago, and just mentally, she didn't have it. It's such a different world, especially from a mental perspective. And so anyway, golf kind of weaved itself in and out of my life. But I would say the genesis was those 2 people in my life. And I played baseball. I didn't play golf growing up. So it was around, but never prominent really until I took that job at CBS Sports at the end of 2012, beginning of 2013. So that was kind of, I would say, the origin story of golf entering into my world and my life and the people in my life.
I love it. That's incredible.
Kyle, I mean, I'll just go ahead and say this to start us off from my side. I mean, I think we've known each other for the better part of 10 years now, maybe even close
Yeah.
to your start at CBS. So this is kind of a full circle moment for me, and it's great to connect the dots. I'm curious to know, in the midst of, you know, CBS being in different places, is there a moment that stands out to you, I guess, whether on the CBS side or now doing your own thing, where you've kind of taken a step back and said, like, how did I get here? Is there a moment that sticks out in your mind of, I can't believe I get to do this?
Oh, there's a lot. The first, as you're asking that question though, the first one that comes to mind is well, there's a couple things. One is just every year at the Masters, you kind of look around and you're like, I'm getting paid for this. I remember I got my job at CBS and I called my dad, as you know, anybody would probably do, call a parent or whoever. And I remember he said, "Are they going to pay you for like to do that?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's a job, Dad. It's a professional job." But I'll never forget that. But yeah, every year at the Masters, you just kind of look around. And you're like, "This is really." I mean, it's hard work. Obviously, we're all in different areas of golf where it's like, yeah, I'm not, you know, drinking a beer and sitting on 16 and watching guys come through. It's different than that, but it's still like extraordinary. But I think the one that I thought of whenever you were asking the question, Danny, was I'll never forget this, and I'm not. eh, I have a love-hate relationship with Twitter, X, whatever we want to call it. And this was back when it was like really a lot more fun, I think. So this was back in 2016. It was after the Ryder Cup that year, and we had just had our third kid, and I got on. I had been kind of out for like 3 weeks or a month or whatever, and I had this DM from Rory, and I don't think I've told this story. And it was like, hey, you know, like you're right. Like the way you cover golf or whatever has been like really life. Like it's life giving. It's great. It's like makes the game fun. And that was like such a moment of like, wait a second, like what's going on here? Like this is so, you know, because I had followed all these guys at least a little bit, and especially guys like Rory and Tiger and whoever, who if you pay attention to sports at all, you're aware of who they are, right? And so I watched the 2012 Ryder Cup when I had a job, you know, at a this insurance company here in Dallas, and then all of a sudden 4 years later, after the 2016 Ryder Cup, it's like I'm getting a message from this person that I watched on TV, like, "Hey, I enjoy your work," and it's like, "Well, I enjoy your work too," you know. So it that was a real like, holy crap, this is really like kind of weird and validating, you know, like a cool thing, but that was a moment where it was just really like kind of a strange experience.
Yeah. How so? You know, we talked a little bit origin story. You mentioned even getting into golf itself, but how did CBS come about? If that's like your first
Yeah.
job, I mean, that's not that's not the average. Like I'm gonna just walk out and be in one of the top spheres. How'd that
Well,
happen?
I mean, that's kind of what it felt like. 2010, I got a job here in Dallas at this corporation. They did insurance and retirement, and it was great. Like it was a good job, good people. But I could see kind of 20 years down the road of like, I don't know if I want to do this for 20 years, you know? And so my wife, we were like 25, 26 at the time. And she was like, just start something. You know, I looked into like starting a snow cone business here in Dallas and just random stuff, you know, and eventually I landed on, I enjoyed writing and I enjoyed sports. So I was like, well, maybe sports writing. I knew at least a little bit about, I'd gone to Oklahoma State, graduated from there. So I knew at least a little bit about Oklahoma State sports. So I just started this website covering Oklahoma State athletics. We're talking about Michigan, Ryan, and it was kind of like MGO blog. Like it was
Gotcha.
the Oklahoma State version of that, or 11 Warriors or whatever. And I didn't naively, I kind of thought like, oh, this will lead to like a national sports writing job, which is a really absurd thing to think. But then I kind of like, honestly, it was pretty providential. I just met some of the right people. I met David Ubben, who now covers Tennessee for the Athletic, and Jonathan Wall, who covers equipment for Digest and just different places over the years. And they knew Shane Bacon had the golf writing job at CBS Sports at the time. They knew he was leaving for Back Nine Network, which is obviously didn't go very well, but worked out good for him, I think. And so those two guys knew the editor at the time at CBS Sports, and so I interviewed with this editor that Jonathan Wall and David Ubben knew, and I got to know Shane a little bit. We talked on the phone, and they just hired me. And I remember I took like probably a 30% pay cut, and I would have taken like probably a 50% pay cut just because I wanted to get into that world and into that industry. I honestly, I probably would have taken a job in like basketball or football or whatever. I just wanted to be a sports writer, and I kind of fell in love with covering OSU. I'd covered OSU for, I guess at that point when I got the job, my wife said, okay, let's give it 2 years and see if it leads to anything. And in like the 23rd month, I think was when CBS, when I interviewed with them and got that job. And I continued running the OSU site until 2020, eventually sold it and have just focused on golf since then. But I actually had dinner with the guy that hired me at the Masters a couple years ago. And I was like, why did you guys hire me? Like, I didn't know anything. I didn't know about golf. I mean, I was coming at it from the perspective, I got an MBA. I didn't know what on the record and off the record was, like, and so I had to learn all these things. And he was like, I expected some like, oh, you blew us away in the interview. He's like, I don't really know. I have no idea why we hired you. So I was like, that's encouraging. That's great. But I'm glad they did. I think it obviously turned out great for me, and hopefully it was beneficial to them as well.
It seems to have worked out fairly well, and here you are, and kind of walking in the space that you have, and all the memories and stories you've been a part of. I think have been pretty powerful. So I'm glad for that. I'm glad for that hiring. So that was cool.
Yeah, me too.
That's awesome. Kyle, I wanted to jump into it a bit. Obviously, we're here because we have a heart for the intersection of people in the golf space, whether they work in it or just enjoy it, and kind of that intersection with living a life of faith. And so I just wanted to ask you, like, where did that develop for you? I know a bit of your backstory, and obviously you can feel, freedom to share as much as you'd like to, but just trying to feel out kind of what that looks like vocationally for you. And then to your point, having a love-hate relationship with the world of X, and it not just being about covering golf and bringing family into play and being a dad. So where does that kind of play out, I guess, vocationally and personally for you?
Yeah, I think to address the second question first, because I think the first question is probably a bigger, broader question. But the second question about just how things play out, I think the hardest part to figure out is what is like a faithful way to have like this parasocial relationship with people, right? Because we live in this world where people have like these one-way relationships. And I think a lot of it is because they don't have good or enough community where they live. And so the internet is great for a lot of things. I think it's probably bad for that. I don't know if that was ever the like intended way for humans to interact. And so I try to share enough that people like feel connected to the story, but not so much that my family or I feel like too exposed or vulnerable in the public sphere, if that makes sense. So, and we can talk more about that later, but in terms of like my relationship with work and my faith and everything, I became a believer when I was in middle school. I played for this basketball team. I was homeschooled. I played for this basketball team, and my coach used to like just kind of do these devotionals or just little talks after our practices, and it just kind of clicked with me one day. He was just he wasn't like a great speaker, but he was just very faithful, and it clicked for me. And I was like, yeah, I was telling somebody this the other day. The thing that I am very grateful for in my life is I've never struggled to believe. Like once once God saved me and I became a believer, I just have been like, yeah, like this is true. And I know that's not everybody's story and not everybody's situation, but I'm very grateful. I've struggled with a million other things, but not specifically that. And for me, in terms of like the way I the way it's played out in my work world, I was sharing with somebody this story the other day about how, so when I first started at CBS, I was 2 years in, we had a stillborn daughter, and that was life changing. Obviously, we had 2 kids prior to that and 2 kids after that, but um, that changed our lives. And I wrote about it, I shared it, and I knew I was going to, because I knew it was so impactful and meaningful from a spiritual perspective that I had to. Like, I would have been, this is like overstating it, but it would have felt unfaithful to not share it. That's like, I'm taking that too far, but that's sort of how I felt. And so once that happened, it was like, well, this is who I am. Like, there's no, we have this weird sort of relationship with our faith and our spiritual lives in the public sphere and in our work. And that can be, it's just tricky to navigate, and you don't know, like, okay, who's going to think this is weird and who's going to be okay with this. And so for me, it was like, oh, it's all out there. Like, this is like who I am. This is what I believe. And so it almost made it, obviously you don't want to go through something like that ever for anybody, but it made it at least vocationally for me a little bit easier to kind of be myself. And CBS was always great about it. I never, my goal, Danny, is not to, like, I'm not going to be teaching you the book of James when I'm on Twitter, but what I can do is use golf to, like, point to eternal realities. And I try to do that as much as I can, even if it's subtle, in everything that I write and do. And so that's sort of the way that I view my, how to be faithful within my vocation currently.
That's really well said, man. And I'll say this, if I didn't say it back then, pointedly enough, I obviously appreciated you based on the fact that we both worked in the golf space. But when you did share that story, it immediately made me think, like, oh, I know this guy even more. And I appreciate that he was willing to be vulnerable enough to walk through a challenge and share it publicly, and not just kind of keep that from, I guess, separated from his work life and how I know him. And just kind of walking through that and pointing back to faith in a moment that I know is probably really hard to walk through. So I'll say it again. I appreciated you then and how you kind of carried that.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that. Yeah, it was so crazy and difficult. But it, I think my wife would also say, like, it was also a time that we're grateful for, because it was kind of like we were in our early 30s, or I think I was 30, and you're like, well, what do I actually believe? Up until that point in my life, I don't know y'all's backstories or backgrounds or whatever, but it had kind of always been, like, easy to be a believer, or to be faithful, or to, like, go to church or do whatever. And then it was like, oh, do I actually believe this? And the answer was yes, thankfully. I think it can go either way. Tim Keller's written a lot about, that's, fork in the road moment type thing. And so yeah, I was glad that it went the way that it did, and also grateful for the experience, which sounds bizarre and stupid and crazy, but I really am, because it changed my life. It changed the trajectory of our family, my kids, and my wife as well. So thanks for saying that.
It's funny, Kyle, you would even say that, like you said, oh, it sounds bizarre, crazy, or whatever, but man, we trace scripture back. Like, everybody had this crazy story, like Moses walking through what he did, or Aaron, or even today, as I was reading about Caleb, I'm like, what a wild time to be walking through. And they're like, they would never think in the future they would be thankful for those wars or battles or even the outcomes that happened. And here you are using that as a light to the fire to keep it rolling on the side.
Yeah. And I think the other part about that is a lot of them would have never thought, like, oh, there will be people in 2025 reading about what I did. Right.
Yeah.
And that's where you see this sort of ordinary faithfulness, I think, that's very pervasive throughout scripture. And that's, there's some people, like King David, like, was obviously, he was a big deal, but for a lot of them, it was like, I don't know, it was just kind of a dude or a woman that just was faithful. And that is so encouraging, because that's how I feel most days. That's how we all feel most days. Like, I'm just a guy trying to, like, parent moderately well and get to the next day. And so that part is encouraging, where it's like, that's how most of the people in the Bible were too. And they were just faithful. And that's a very encouraging message.
That's awesome. I love it. We're here in the clubhouse, as we call it. I am intrigued by how you two even connected. What's the story for you and Danny? How's that go down?
We sent like 900 emails back and forth.
Something like that, give or take. No, obviously me coming from the background of the, PR communication space and living in the social space and supporting brands and other entities in the golf space and knowing that he was at CBS and, covering the landscape of golf. We had stayed connected and just kind of keeping him updated on what I was working on and his willingness to cover some of those things, which was always a huge help to me. But then, I think it evolved more so into just following him and kind of his journey and path in the game and being kind of an anchor, follow Ryan, as you hit on at the top, of someone that has a pulse on the game and just wanting to make sure I have eyes on everything that's happening.
That's good. I love that. Kyle, Danny, a good guy. I mean, what are your thoughts on Danny?
Well, I was going to say, no, that sums it up. Like, I mean, he seems like it. He always sent me a bunch of gear and, it was interesting. Again, I didn't know like how any of this worked. And there are still some days where I feel like I don't, but at least I have somewhat of a grasp on it now. But in the early days, it was like, hey, we want to send you some gear. Like maybe you can write about it or whatever. And I was like, oh, sounds great to me. Like, I don't know. And so then you start to figure out, oh, okay, this is sort of the way to go about things. But yeah, we've always had a good working relationship and been friendly with each other.
I love it. That's good to hear because it's not always easy. But Danny,
I appreciate you reaffirming it, Ryan. I appreciate you reaffirming it.
But it's really cool because Danny does have this. Danny, you're right here. I guess I can talk to you. Danny, I feel like your connection. You find good people, and especially when you line up with faith, those two things go hand in hand. And when that happens, it seems to be good things continue to follow for that. Like you're a good anchor for people. You are, and I'll speak even for me. Like Kyle mentioned about like gear. I still own a University of Michigan tumbler that you gave me like a decade ago. I still have this Yeti. Like, and I can't. I've lost it 5 times, and it keeps coming home. It's the prodigal Yeti, and I love that
Yeti,
thing because it's just such a cool thing to have. It's a reminder. It's a little Ebenezer to say this is such a good friend, and so you're a good dude, man. So I appreciate you, Dan.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
that's a good segue. Kyle, I was going to say, our guy Jeff Marsh, obviously a co-founder of Restoration Club, and you understanding a bit more about what we're building here, but he credits you with the speed photo that was seen around the world. Thanks to X. And then I love that you talked to our guy, the Sarge, Cody McBride, recently. He actually was, believe it or not, at our first, what we coined the Builders Cup, our annual golf trip. So got him involved early too. What was, I guess, either a faith step or just a nod and confidence in stepping away from something like a CBS to start normal sport for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I had done it. I had been on my own a little bit before in that when I started my Oklahoma State site back in 2011. But I always had a safety net. It was that was always kind of my side hustle. And now there's no safety net. I think the biggest thing, like honestly, I would say the biggest thing is it's exciting, sure, but the biggest thing is like my wife and I are on the same page. And so I went to her and we were like, hey, let's try this this was back in September. I said, let's try this for 5 months. And if it works, great. And if not, like that would be my biggest, like people ask like, oh, how should I go about things? How should I get into the industry? Whatever. It's like, man, put a time frame around and some parameters around what you're trying to accomplish, and then reevaluate it at the end of that. Because if not, it just becomes either too overwhelming to think about, or you just kind of lose your vision. And so to kind of like iterate and reset after 3 months, 5 months, whatever the number is, I think is so important. And then also I would attribute a ton of credit to my wife. Like if you're not on the same page with your spouse, then like you might as well just hang it up, And so she has been not only with this, but even telling me to start my Oklahoma State site or a snow cone stand or whatever it was going to be. She's like, yeah, just go do it. And so she's been very encouraging, not just with her words, but in the way that she has given me space and freedom to kind of work on things like that, which has been just really, I mean, it literally would not have happened without her blessing and her encouragement.
Good. I love the Cohen. I'm like, knowing that that is an anchor for you is such a huge thing, especially having a spouse that supports and encourages. And honestly, it sounds like even pushes you and says, "Hey,
Yeah.
go ahead and
Yeah.
do it." And I do one day want to see the snow cone business. I want to see it happen.
Man,
Let's after.
we had some plans. Dealing with Tiger is nothing compared to dealing with
Yeah.
like the city of Richardson and like all the stipulations. It's like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I just want to serve sugar water. Like,
Yeah, right.
what do you like, you guys are crazy about
Yeah.
this.
That's funny.
Yeah, no, she's honestly, I've said this. I don't think this is true anymore because I think my illustrator, Jason Page, is a really good editor for me, but I've always called her my best editor because she'll tell me, she's like, what are you talking about here? And most people, you have this professional space where it's like, oh, maybe you could do this differently. And she's like, you're an idiot, which can be very helpful if as long as I take it the right way.
That's good. And I'm glad you mentioned Jason because I've always wondered who does that artwork. So I'm really glad that, and I
Yeah.
read through it. I just didn't even recognize, but such good work in that illustration side. So kudos.
Yeah,
to
Jason lives, he's from PA, but he lives in Amsterdam. He's
Oh,
lived
wow.
over there for, I want to say 10, 11 years now. And he's great. He is such a great partner in all this. As you guys know, it's so much more fun to do it with people that you connect with, and you can do things alone, but it's so lonely. And why would you want to, why would you do that? So he's been an awesome partner, a great thought partner as well. Like, we just trade thoughts, and most of them never see the light of day. But I think we're both good at like picking out each other's best stuff and trying to publish and produce that. So he's been awesome.
Kyle, now that you know a bit more about Restoration Club, I'm curious just to ask you, because I feel like everybody has their own opinion, thought of where they kind of fit into this type of community, where you've probably forged some really strong friendships in the game, and then also towing the line as a quote unquote media member. Like, where do you feel like a community that obviously is intentional about using the game to forge stronger relationships and ultimately hopefully introduce or reintroduce a relationship with Jesus, where does that play in your mind in the golf community as it stands now in the way that you know it?
Well, what's interesting about it is we've kind of mimicked it, whether intentionally or unintentionally, in our local community. We started a men's golf league at our church, and it's been. I remember, I probably shouldn't tell this story, but I remember I was kind of in a leadership position, and I sent out an email. This was probably 3 years ago, 4 years ago, maybe, to every male with a email address at our church, every adult male, and I remember our lead pastor was like, he called me and he's like, "What? Like, you probably should have like run this past somebody first." And I was like, "Well, I was kind of just kind of trotting it out there, see what happened." And now he says, his name's also Kyle, but he says, and it's been one of the best things for our adult, like the men in our church, because it it creates relational time. We try to tell our, like, we play these 9-hole matches, and we tell them, hey, like, try to walk unless it's like 110 out, like just go walk, talk, see what's going on with each other, just build up friendship. And I know that's like not exactly what Restoration Club is, but in the same way that you guys have built that, and it's aimed at relationship and being outside and enjoying people, like that's been sort of our vision for this kind of local communal golf league. So not exactly answering your question, but that's been like the biggest, like the best way I can kind of describe how I have fit in or whatever to Restoration Club.
Well, I mean, you said kind of, it just is. What you're naming is exactly what we do and how we get around. And I just love the idea of like the organic way. of cultivating relationships by taking time together. And that will always cultivate good relationship with intentionality. And that's
Mhm.
just it doesn't matter if you're into whatever portion of the game or whatever, it just does by spending time together around good people. You end up being better. It's iron and iron, that
Yeah,
kind of thing. And I'm sure there's a pun or an analogy with golf clubs and that iron and
for
iron thing
sure.
too. We'll talk about it later, but don't steal that from me, Kyle. I better not see it
I
in a
won't.
normal.
I won't. Trust me, I won't.
You're like, trust me, I'm not going to take that line. That's good, but it's such a beautiful thing to especially see the local church find something that they can commit to and the people take on, and it fits. And so, I mean, kudos to you even jumping the gun and sending it out to every single. I mean, I don't even how many thousands of people is that? Geez, it was like
No, it wasn't that many. It was in the hundreds.
yeah,
It was several hundred. So
yeah,
it's not a tiny. It's like a good medium sized church.
that's good. That's awesome. I
Yeah.
love it.
I was gonna say we have a Discord channel, and I think we've grown to, gosh, it might be 15, 20 different chapters around the country. To your point
Yeah.
about guys meeting locally, and I think maybe selfishly we always want kind of that through point of being connected to everybody because of what we're building and just having a pulse on what's going on. But I don't think we get more hyped than seeing two guys who don't even know each other hop into like a West Coast chapter and go play
Mm,
around together, and then
Yeah.
they
yeah.
become friends. And I think that's where you realize it's bigger than you, and there's probably a huge opportunity for other guys in other areas to kind of lean in and do that together.
Yeah, and it's been interesting. I feel like golf has become this well, a couple things. It's become and this has probably always happened, but I'm just getting to the age where it happens more. Like it's become something that most of my friends are pretty into in terms of playing and just being around it. Um but I think the other thing, it's become like a safe space for community. And even the secular world would say like, yeah, this is a great place for community. And I think the Christian world would say like, yeah, we've been saying that, and so that's exciting to me because there's not, you talk to guys, who are, I'm almost 40. So you talk to guys who are my age and it's like, where do you make friendships? Like, where do you meet people? Like maybe at work or like whatever, but it's been a great, place to build up community and specific with a specific intention on talking about the things of the Lord and talking about how like God, like the fact that we play golf on God created earth is pretty awesome. Like every other sport, it's an arena or a man-made structure, which is totally fine. Like I grew up playing baseball and my kids play flag football or whatever. But I just think that is really, really unique and special about golf, and you get to enjoy it and experience it whenever you're out there with other people.
Kyle, I'm trying to remember. Have you made it into the media lottery to play Augusta before?
I have, yes.
I mean, can you give a top 5 relived moments there or no?
Yeah, so 2017, I think it was my fifth year to cover or fourth year to cover at golf at CBS, but I didn't go to the Augusta for the first couple of years, so that was only my second year to cover the event. I had been, ironically, before I worked I went less when I started working at CBS because my grandfather had badges, so we would kind of go with family or whatever. Then I got my job, and they're like, "Yeah, we're not really going this year." So I'm like, "Ah, I got a job in golf, and now I can't go to the Masters." So anyway, 2017, I win the lottery on Friday. Sergio and Justin Rose are in a playoff, and you're like, they better finish this thing before dark. I don't need them coming out here on Monday interrupting my tee time. I don't think they send you off after the playoffs over. Right. And so Sergio makes the putt, and it was a great ending to that Masters. And yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go hole by hole, but it was the two things. One, it was a very surreal, like it almost felt like you were watching, it would almost felt you were playing a video game because you've seen every piece of that course so many times. And then you're like, wait, how am I in it? Like it was really kind of strange and surreal. But then the second one is, I played pretty bad for the first like 12 or 13 holes and started to hit it a little better. My best shot of the day was a tee shot on 15. Hit it. The member tees are pretty far up, but I hit it kind of down the hill or like it was on the downslope on
Did you clear the
15
water?
over the hill.
Did you
Do
clear
I
the water on 2 on the
on
second
my
shot?
so that's what I was
Yeah.
about to say is I gave a this camera to my caddy. I was like, hey, I love this spot on the course. My dad and I would sit on 16 and watch guys come in at 15 and watch 16. So could you take a video of this shot? And I must have stood over the ball for like 45 seconds. Like I couldn't pull the trigger. I was like, all I could think about was like, well, you never get to hit this shot again. So better be good. And of course I hit like 9 inches behind the ball, barely made contact. And it didn't even get to the water. Like I was like 185 out and I couldn't get it to the water. So I ended up making par, but it was a hilarious, like, I can't believe that I still have the video. I watched it the other day because I was telling somebody about it. And I just, as soon as I make contact, I just look up like this, like, you'll never get to hit that shot again. It's your favorite shot. You'll never have it again. But it was amazing. It was the best experience. Augusta, like the people there were just so great, and they know how you feel playing it, and they're very accommodating to that reality. So it was incredible.
I mean, an unintentional layup for a par on 15.
Yeah.
There are worse ways to go.
And when do we see the video is the question.
I'll send it to you for sure.
Do that.
I'll text it to you guys.
That'd be awesome. That's such a cool experience. Just like I couldn't even imagine. It was like you said, you're staring at the things you've always seen. You're like, this is an incredible spot to be over it. And I would have done this. Yeah, 45 seconds. Probably I would have hit 60 seconds. And the caddy would have said, "What are you doing?" I'm like, honestly, I don't know right now.
I had no idea.
I love it. That's good.
Kyle, is there just curious, is there a long play for normal sport? Is it just week to week? Let's figure out how this thing goes, or what's kind of the vision?
It feels very week to week right now. I mean, my goal is to get to the end of the year. You know, are we alive at the end of the year? That'd be great. We've had some, like, the trajectory has been pretty good. We've had some really great sponsors jump on board, like, companies like Garmin and Meridian Putters and Precision Pro, Seed Golf, Holderness and Bourne. So like companies that are like, man, I really like OGO. I really wanted to partner with those brands, and they're partnering with me. Like, this is awesome. So that's been great. I think, my thing is, now that we've got a little bit of breathing room, you start to think like, okay, what's my vision for this? Is it just going to be a newsletter for the next 20 years? Maybe, like, that'd be okay, I guess. But are there other components that you want to add to it? And if so, how do you do that? How do you begin to do that? So those are just kind of some of the things that I'm thinking about. I've had a real passion or vision for creating an on-ramp for my kids to get into golf somehow. I think Tyler over at Charlie Golf Co. is doing a great job of this by building the bags that he's built. I think there are other ways that this, you see short course, like kids courses at like Old Barnwell, but at different places like that. And it's like, oh, that's awesome. But there's not I can't let my kids listen to, let's say, the No Laying Up podcast. Not because I don't like those guys. Those guys are great friends, but like it gets a little dicey for my 8-year-old to listen to that sometimes. And so how do I create an on-ramp for my kid who doesn't want to watch 10 hours of the Sony Open, obviously? How do I get him into golf? And I think that I've had a few ideas around that. I think something like a Sports Illustrated for kids, but for golf would be really, maybe like Golfer's Journal, but for kids is a different way to say that. So there's some different things that I'm kind of playing around with there, but I mean, you said it, like, it's a little bit, it's not week to week anymore, but it does feel like month to month, and like, hey, let's try to build up some processes and some just ways to get us to the end of the year, and then maybe once we get there, we can start to reevaluate.
Awesome. Yeah, man, I'd love to see the support. So you're basically saying we can clip that list of partners and migrate them over this way, is what you're saying?
For sure.
Well, and also Kyle's a dad of toddler boys that are 3 and 5 and really want to get them in the game as well sometime. And they're avid readers. I would support any kind of visual book, whatever it is that would get them, they have an ABCs of Junior Golfer book. It's this little board book, they'll tell you to this day, E is for eagle, P
Is
is
that the
for
one that
putter.
is that the one that has is there a Rory thing in there and it's like N is for Nike or something?
I know that one. We don't have that one. We just have
Okay.
the non copyright infringement one. That's the one we
Gotcha.
have.
Yeah, I mean, look, like there's so many dads that are 35 with 3 kids that read our newsletter or that follow whatever. And it's like, man, what is a way to help them not only get their kids into golf, but to help them spend time with their kids,
Yeah,
right?
there you go.
Because the real win there is not necessarily does your kid love golf, but do you have a good relationship with your kid?
Yeah.
You know, and that creating something like that, even that book that you mentioned, or something similar, I think it'd be awesome. Like, I think it would, I don't know. It's hard because there's just, Danny, you know this, I've been so like in the digital space that the overhead cost for digital stuff is like incrementally zero. Like it costs effectively $0 to send one more email. That's not like an actual number, but it basically is zero. And then you start to get into, we printed I wrote a normal sport book, 3 of the last 4 years. And it's like, oh, that's a different cost than I thought it would be. And so that starts to get a little tricky. But I think if you have a foundation of those newsletter readers built up and maybe of some sort of audio medium built up, I mean, those are the 2 most intimate things, I think, in terms of media. It's email and podcast, because email, it feels like it was made just for you. Like it's just getting to your inbox. And even though it was sent to maybe 15,000 other people, it still feels pretty intimate. And then podcasts, I think, just voices, hearing the same voices in your head over and over, it makes you feel like your buddies, your friends. That's such an intimate thing. And so I think those are the 2 most important mediums in terms of building up a company if you're looking at using media as sort of a marketing tool.
That's good. These kids out of Maryland, these MD foodie boys. I don't know if you know who this is, but this is the most incredible podcast. These 4 kids who are probably, I don't know, maybe 13 years old. And they're just talking about foods, and they don't eat any food. They just eat like pepperoni and cheese pizza and have just now tried celery for the first time, like crazy stuff. But they've got already just such a fire like follow. And I'm picturing like 13-year-old boys who love golf just to sit around a podcast table talking about the experience they maybe had with their dad, or how they went out with their grandpa and played around, or what went well and what are they hitting today. Those kind of fun things, instead of being so pretentious and over the top. Sometimes it just could be a really cool shout out to MD foodie boys out there. If y'all want to collab, let's talk.
Well, I think you just described how No Laying Up started. Basically, they weren't 13, but they just kind of threw a phone down and started talking around a table.
Yeah,
right.
That's fair enough.
And I think there is something that's very compelling to people about it feeling like what you do with your friends. And obviously they're talented and skilled and everything, but I do think there's a realness there with a lot of the media businesses that you see, not just No Laying Up, but other media businesses that you see, that it's like, oh yeah, I do that with my buddies. Like, of course I would listen to that, because it's bringing me in on something that I'm already, doing with other people.
That's cool. I love that. Well, as we're coming to the end here, Danny always pitches this amazing question that I've just always been a fan of, because when he first crafted it, I'm like, what a great question. So Danny, I'm gonna let you have it with Kyle here at the end.
Yeah, man. Yeah, before we get you out of here with the last question, I was going to say too, don't quote me, and maybe in the works, but we might see some Charlie Golf Restoration Club bags at some point. So maybe your kids will be first carriers. We'll see what happens. But yeah, man, appreciate your time. And with that said, we always want to ask everybody, what is your favorite memory on a golf course not involving a golf club?
Not involving a golf club. And well, there's 2. Can I give 2?
Please.
Yep.
Okay. First one that comes to mind is every year that I'm at Augusta, I walk through the course. I walk back to the media center through an empty course, and it's such a juxtaposition to like there was 30,000-40,000 people out there 20 minutes ago, and then it's empty and it's silent. And that place, if you've been there when there's nobody there, is like, it's eerie is the wrong word, but it's just, it feels like Narnia or something. It feels like it's just, I don't know. It's hard to describe unless you've kind of been there when it's empty and when it's kind of getting dark. That moment for me, and I usually do it on the weekend, like Saturday night, Sunday night. It's always a very passage in time moment where it's like, oh, my kids are 1 year older than they were when I did this time last year. My wife and I have been married 1 year longer, or my parents are 1 year older, or whatever. So that's one that's pretty, I do pretty often. It's pretty consistent. And then the other one that just popped into my mind, I will never forget the 2023 Ryder Cup in Rome. And I was standing on this 16th tee box with I think it was Kevin Van Valkenburg and some other guys that were out there covering it, and it was either Fleetwood or Rory's group, and you're just like the sun setting over the Italian countryside, which sounds incredibly pretentious, but it was amazing. And you're just like walking toward the 16th hole with all these people that you become friends with, and this amazing event that you're covering, and these superstars that are just hit in front of you, and everybody's kind of walking together. And it's just like, it goes back to the question earlier of like, how is this my job? Like, how do I, not only how do I get to experience this, but how do I get paid to experience this? And I just have so many, one thing we talk about in our house a lot is gratitude. Like, do you have gratitude for like the things that you're getting to do and the life that you're getting to live? And the older I've gotten, the more I've tried to take those moments of gratitude on the course. And that's one that it just really stands out to me of like, that was like the Ryder Cup's my favorite event. And that was such a moment of like, this is unbelievable. And I feel incredibly grateful to get to be part of this and get to do this for a living.
Man, I'd take either.
I mean,
although I will say,
yeah,
I have been at Augusta on a practice round, coming back from the clubhouse, walking to the 16th hole entrance when nobody else is out there, and you're exactly right. It's a different feeling.
It's weird.
Yeah, and Kyle, if you need an assistant this year, just let me know. I can carry your pens or whatever you need, your digital notebooks, all that stuff. I'll do whatever you need. I'm still 27 years strong of lottery losses, so I'm really getting after it. So we'll see. I feel like we're getting closer and closer. The more
they can't defeat you 28 years in a row.
No one can stop me. Like I could always buy a ticket, but I just have to sell one of my kids, and I don't want to sell any kids. So this is how we do it. But man, thank you so much for this time. This was like, I mean, this is the first time I met you, and I feel like I was just talking to my buddy for a long time. So it's really cool.
For sure.
Hearing journey, hearing kind of your heart play out in different layers of your work, and I'm excited about Normal Sport. I think it's going to be easier than getting past the end of the year, to tell you that. So how can people connect to Normal Sport?
Yeah, normalsport.com. You can sign up. 80% of our stuff is free. We've got some things we have a paid membership of like 530 people. And so we've got some extra things there, but if you want to just read almost all of it, it's free at normalsport.com.
Awesome. Love it, man. Well, again, Kyle, thank you from the whole clubhouse here and everyone there. We appreciate your time, and until next time.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, man. All right, guys. Well, another unbelievable one, man. That was Kyle Porter, formerly of CBS, of Normal Sport now. Man, just a good dude.
Yeah, honestly, it truly is one of my favorite email inbox things I get. I just love reading it, and I'm excited to check out even more of whatever they're up to. An amazing guy. I just appreciate just the light that he shed into so much stuff, because I don't know, there's just positivity oozing out of this episode.
Definitely go sign up for the newsletter at Normal Sport. I hope you guys listen to this one, even if it was just to catch him reliving the second shot on 15 at Augusta. Man, that was a good story. I'll remember that one. Well, guys, that was season 3. Man, we're just rolling through here. Episode 2. I'm sure this is coming out just a few weeks before Augusta. I hope you guys are locked in and ready for the first major of the year. Definitely check us out, restorationclub.co. Always follow us on Instagram, restoration_club. Check us out on Discord. Hopefully a merch drop soon. Putting some things together. Keep your eyes peeled. But Ryan, man, until the next one, keep swinging.
Keep swinging.